What's up, everyone? My name is Ross, and we are gathered here today to kind of go over how to take this faded old photo that's been sitting in a frame for many years and gotten pollution from the sun and radiation and just turned into this orange, terrible mess. And we're going to take this photo, restore the colors, and end up hopefully with something like this. I say hopefully because I didn't mark down how exactly I edited this photo, and I'm going to just trash that folder right now, and we're going to start from the beginning. Now, as always, the way I'm going to start this edit is hitting Command J to duplicate the layer because we want to work non-destructively in Photoshop. And once that's duplicated, the first thing I'm going to try to tackle is you're going to see this kind of, there's basically, because this photo was sitting in a frame for many years, there's kind of this weird edge, the hard edge around the side that is, most of the photo is faded, but the other outside edges are dark. That's what I'm trying to say here. So what I'm going to try to do is just match that edge as best as I can. And I'm going to grab the marquee tool. It's over here. You can grab it, or I believe it's M is the shortcut on the keyboard. And I'm going to get as close to this edge as I can all the way around to make a quick selection. Now, once I have that, I'm going to hit Command Shift I to inverse the selection, and then I'm going to go into my adjustment layers down here, and I'm going to add a new curves adjustment layer. Now, what this did, I'm going to do a drastic change. Basically, it's just selecting the outside borders that we want to kind of target, and don't worry about the hard edge. We're going to take care of that later. So once I have my selection made, I need to brighten it, essentially. So I could just grab and pull up in this, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to grab this little, I actually want to delete. Damn it. All right, bear with me. New curves adjustment layer. Okay, now we got a fresh one. I'm going to grab this little slider tool here, and what that's going to do is allow me to basically target my selection on the tonal curve. So I'm going to grab this first and just pull this up until it's pretty much matching. Now what I can do then is also go and match some of these other areas as well. Or at least try to match them. Okay, that's looking decent. We'll clean up the rest of it once we get down the line with some cloning and patch tool work. But I'm liking how this is initially looking. Now what we're going to do, if you click on the actual mask of the curves adjustment, typically you see this view, the properties view, and you're going to see the tonal curve. If you click into the actual curves, you get this density and feather slider. What I like to do is just kind of feather it from here. Like so, and you can see kind of a before and after, and I'm just looking at this edge mainly, this upper right corner for now. Like I said, we're going to take care of the rest of these corners, the lower right and the bottom, later on when we get into the clone tool and patch tool. That's looking pretty good for me, so I'm happy with that. What I'm going to now do is going to go through my 3-step color correction process, if you will. And I have another video that I've done prior to this one. You can go back and watch that, but we're going to do it right now anyway, so just bear with me. So we're going to do a new threshold adjustment layer, and I'm going to try to find my darkest dark point, which it looks like it's going to be up here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to grab I, which is my eyedropper tool, and you can actually see I had a point set already. I'm going to set that point there. Now I'm going to try to find my brightest white, and how I do that is grab the threshold adjustment layer again and go all the way to the right. This area over here, if you don't know, the farthest to the right is the brightest whites, farthest to the left is the darkest darks, and everything in between are the midtones. So I'm going to grab the slider and pull it to the right until I just see some whites clipping, and it looks like I'm clipping kind of down in this area, which, yes, my other eyedropper was down there. Perfect. So now how do we find the midtones? The midtones are tricky. The best way that I found is if you create a new solid color, set it to 50% gray, because we want it to be neutral. Set that blend mode to difference, and then do Command left bracket to drop it below the threshold layer. what this is doing is it's creating a difference layer, but 50% gray. So it's going to grab everything that's the difference, which should be hypothetically your midtones. It works about 80% of the time, so we're going to try it right now. So what we're going to do is go back to the threshold, and you can see that our tonal curve has now shifted. It's much narrower, and it's all the way, not all the way, but more so to the left. So what we're going to do is grab the slider and jam it all the way to the left again until we see some clipping happening on the very left side of that. And I think my strongest ones are down here in the corner, actually. So I'm going to drop, I want to see where my other, I already dropped 3 markers on this. So there's 1, 2, I'm trying to find where my 3rd marker is. I don't see it. So we're going to drop a 4th one, anywho, down here in this area. So if I turn these off quick, oh, there it is. I wasn't too far off. It's looking like my neutral grays are going to be in this area. So we'll play. I got 3 and 4. This 3rd one, like I said, was a marker that I did for my previous edit, so we'll see if that works, or I'll just go with the number 4. So we can get rid of these 2 layers now because I'm done with them. I'm going to zoom all the way back out. Now what I can do, let me get rid of this timeline. It's chewing up a lot of real estate. I am going to create a new curves adjustment layer, and with these eyedroppers on the left here, I'm going to set my white point, my black point, and my gray point. So I'm going to start with my white point, which was number 2, drop it there, go to my black, which was number 1, which is there, and then I'm going to do my mid-tone, and I'm going to hit number 4 here because that was the one that I just dropped. And that's actually not too bad. You can already see that we've brought a lot of color back into this photo, albeit that it is faded, but it's going to give us a great starting point to kick off the rest of this edit. You can also notice that the dark border from that frame is still very apparent. Don't worry about that. We're going to take care of that. So once I have that done, I'm going to grab a new curves adjustment layer again. And here's a quick tip that also works, I'd say 70 to 75% of the time. If you hold your Option key on the keyboard and click on this auto button, it's going to bring up a new dialog box. And what this is going to allow us to do is throw on some different algorithms that are built in but are hidden within inside Photoshop. So the first one that's always checked is this enhanced brightness and contrast. I don't typically use this. If I use anything, it's going to be find dark and light colors or enhance per channel contrast. So I'm going to click dark and light colors. And then the magic, or where you're going to make your money with this little tool, is snapping neutral midtones. And it's kind of making a liar out of me because it's not doing too much. But if you can see this, it is making our photo more neutral, which is what we want when we're doing a color correction edit. We want to have the most high dynamic range neutral photo that we can, because that allows us to push colors in any direction that we want. So once I have that done, I'm going to hit OK. Now from here, excuse me, from here we're looking pretty good, but we want to bring out more colors. It's just too flat. Most people think that you could probably jump into curves or levels or even brightness and contrast, and I just want to show you, if I bump up the contrast, it's going to kind of work, but it's going to really, actually that's not too bad, brightness and contrast, pulling them opposite directions. Let's start here. This is not how I edited it before, by the way, but this is the beauty with Photoshop. You can do one edit 1,000 different ways and get to the same end result. So I'm not too terribly disappointed in how this is working. I'm going to do this edit quick here, and now I'm going to hit Command Option Shift E to merge a visible layer. And this is how I did it in my previous edit, which I then uploaded to the Reddit user that is allowing me to use this image today, which thank you for allowing me to use your image. Big shout out to you. But back into the tutorial here. So once I have a flattened visible layer over here, on top of all my edits, because once again I want to work non-destructively, I'm going to go up to Image, Apply Image. I'm going to do the layer is merged, so it's going to take all those layers and then apply that image to my current layer, and the blend mode set to multiply. Now, just a quick pro tip here in Photoshop. Apply Image is another hidden little feature in Photoshop that I don't think nearly enough people utilize. You can do a lot with it. You can get more precise masking. It's insane. So what I'm gonna show you two things here. I'm gonna apply an image to this image, and then I'm gonna apply an image to a mask to show you the power of this thing. So I want multiply selected as my blending mode. I want the layer to be merged, and I'm gonna hit OK. So what this is gonna do, it's kind of like taking two layers. You could take one layer and then another layer on top of it and saying blend mode multiply over here. So if I hit Command J, I could do multiply, and it's kind of doing the same thing. But what I like to do then, let me step back actually. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to undo the apply image. I'm going to create a new layer because I actually need this layer 1, and I'll show you why in a second here. So I'm going to grab layer 1 copy, I'm going to go image, apply image again, merged, multiply, hit OK. So the reason why I kept layer 1 here is now with layer 1 copy, I can create a mask, and I can apply the layer 1 image to the mask of this layer. And why I would want to do that is because I have a lot of leeway into how the multiply is getting then applied to the image. That might not make sense, but I hope visually it'll make sense here in a second. I'm going to hit OK. So if I turn this mask off, this is what it looks like. It's making everything very dark. If I turn the layer mask on, it's kind of darkening more so the highlights. If I turn it off and on, you can see the difference. It's not much, but it does help bring detail back into these highlighted areas. If I turn it off, kind of blown out, bring it back in, you get a lot more detail in the hair. Apply image is awesome for bringing back details into the highlight, and vice versa. If you need to push the other way, instead of doing multiply, you could do screen and bring details back in the shadows. But I will tell you, bringing details back into the shadows is much harder than bringing details back into the highlight. So getting back into this, I'm liking where this is going. What I want to do next, and so another pro tip, as long as we're here on this mask, if you have a mask selected, you can hit Command M or Command L to bring up curves or levels respectively. I'm going to bring up levels just to show you what this is going to do. So if I bring in from the left, it's going to darken over here. If you look, the entire mask. Don't necessarily want to do that, but I'm just showing you what you can do with a layer mask. You have all the other adjustment tools that you can use. They're just going to be destructive in nature. So if I applied this, the only way to get back is to hit Command Z to get out of it. I'm not going to do that. I just want to show you that. But back into the edit. So this is looking pretty good. I like where this is going. From here, this is where I would typically do my cleanup of the image. So I would get out my clone and patch tool and go through and get rid of all this junk that's going on. Make sure I'm actually on a flat layer so that my edits would take place. So this would be when I start to clean up the image. And also this is when I would get rid of this dark border. I'm not going to do the whole thing because that's going to take a long time, but I'm going to show you the technique that I use. So I'm going to bring up the stamp tool by hitting S. I'm going to hit my blend mode on my stamp tool to be lighten. I'm going to set it to a low flow, and if you can see up here, I have it set to 25. I'm just going to sample an area over here, and I'm going to lighten. Now, why do I have lighten set instead of normal? Well, I know these areas are darker. Sorry, I know the areas that I'm sampling from are lighter than the areas that I'm going to clone tool. So it's not going to do much to the areas that are similar. So if I go here, it's going to basically actually kind of get rid of all these dark specks, which is a hidden bonus in itself. But what I really want to do is just kind of lighten the dark edges. They're darker and they need to match what's next to it. Now, yes, you can go and put this on normal. It's however you want to work. I prefer to use the lighten and darken blend modes within the clone stamp tool. That's how I work. Once again, there's 1,000 different ways to do everything in Photoshop. This is just how I work. So that's how I'd go about doing that. And as you can see, if I zoom out, that's getting rid of that edge pretty awesome. Now I'm just going to go down here quick and show you why, once again, to reinforce why I would use lighten on my clone stamp tool. I'm going to sample up here, and it just, for me, it blends so much more nicely than if I were to struggle. Not necessarily struggle. I would just take a little more effort to do it with the normal blend mode. And hidden bonus here. So if I sampled this green, what is she holding on to? Flowers. It's not going to necessarily take everything. It will take some of the flower, but if I started sampling over here and I run into that flower eventually, it's not going to look as gross as if I had this on normal and I sampled next to this flower and then start going into it, because it's going to pull that whole flower in, whereas because it's lightened, it's only going to lighten the areas that are darker than the original. All right, moving on. So I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you can see how I can clean up that border in the upper right here and the lower bottom portion just using the clone stamp. Now, once again, this is the part where I would use the clone stamp and the patch tool to clean up all of this stuff, because you can see I've got all this junk just kind of, it's an aged photo, so it's going to have these like the pitting and dust and scratches and everything else. Now, I know a lot of people like to use the filter, dust and scratches, and use filters like that. The best way to do it is just take your time and get your nose into it and go piece by piece. You got to have a little OCD, but it's going to come out much cleaner. So let's pretend that I've done that and this is a flawless image. The border's gone. Where do I go from here? Well, like I said, the color's already looking pretty darn good. I'm going to Command J to duplicate my layer because I don't want to destroy anything that I've previously done. And we're going to go up to my favorite filter, Camera Raw filter. I've preached it before, but even with a JPEG, anything, the Camera Raw filter can really push your colors and push the tone and just really jazz up your photo. So bear with my computer because it's slow. So the first thing I always do is I go over here to camera calibration, and I pull the reds to the right, I pull the blues to the left, and that instantly, if I show you before and after, it's already making it look kind of just awesome. It's pushing colors around. So once I have that set, I'll go back into my basic edit. I'll turn up the contrast a little bit, drop some highlights because I do want to recover the highlights, bump up the shadows, bump up the whites, drop the blacks, drop the clarity just a little bit. Now, just the background on this image. This was a fantastic image provided by a Reddit user. They did a very high resolution scan, which always makes a photo retoucher's job much more easier. This photo was scanned at a DPI, dots per inch, of 1200, I believe, which is insane. Now, I've downscaled it because my computer's being a little B tonight, but I got it set, I think, down to 72 just because I've already handed off the original, and it's just going to be a quicker edit if I have a smaller file size. But I always drop the clarity a little bit because we can bring back sharpening using a high pass filter at the end. All right, so I drop clarity. I'll bump the vibrance actually up. This is, once again, this is how I typically do. I'll jack the vibrance, but then I'll drop saturation. And I don't know if there's a difference if I drop the vibrance and boost the saturation. This is just how I've edited my photos. This is what works for me, and this is what I've grown to like. So this is looking pretty good, but I'm getting some weird blue discoloration going on. I'm going to jump over into the hue, saturation, and luminance values. In the blue, I think I can probably just drop well, I'm going to do that in a layer mask once I get out of this. I'm thinking this is looking pretty good. I'm going to play with a little bit of the sliders here just to see where I can push and pull things. That's looking pretty good. So over here, the left is our before. Over here on the right is the after. I'll dehaze it a little bit. Dehaze is just going to bring back kind of more contrast. Might add a slight vignette. Okay, that's looking okay. I'm going to hit okay. Get into this. I'm just going to group this quick and show you thus far what we got. So this is our before, and this is our after, and most people would be pretty satisfied. I don't like the blue thing that's going on here, so what I'm going to do is go hue saturation. I'm going to grab the slider tool, which is up here, and I'm just going to target these blues. Maybe. There it goes. Man, that is acting funky. I must have did something different in my previous edit. Or it was just because I zoomed far enough out. So that's looking okay. But now this whole shawl, or whatever she's wearing, is kind of desaturated. Pro tip number 2 or 3, or whatever we're on, I'm just going to grab my brush tool, start a new layer so I can sample colors. And I'm gonna grab one of these colors. I think it was more of a purplish shawl blanket. I'm not sure what she's wearing. What does anyone know what she's wearing? By the way, this is a fantastic photo. The Reddit user was talking to me. I believe it was taken in the 70s, so it's sat in a photo frame for, man, 40 years. Yeah, and it's still just compositionally, it's an awesome photo, and I'm glad I could help you out with this edit. So what I'm gonna do, I've sampled the color over here. In a new blank layer, I'm just gonna just paint like I'm finger painting in kindergarten. Kind of keep it contained. I've got my opacity set pretty low. I'm gonna bump that up just to 50% to get this moving, and I'm gonna set the flow to about 35. I'm not using a tablet. I'm using my mouse. You can probably hear me clicking around. So the way I always do this is set a low opacity, set a low flow, and just kind of build up a painting as I go. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. I'm gonna set this to soft light. That's looking okay. That's not looking so bad. It's bringing back some more color. I'm gonna bump this up even further by hitting new hue saturation adjustment layer, and I'm going to clip it by hitting this little icon here to the layer that I just did. Now what this allows us to do is give us full control. If I bump the saturation all the way to the right, it's giving us full control over the color that we just laid down. And if I ever want to add more to it, because you can see I've obviously missed some areas, as long as I have the same color, and this is important, you have to have the same color selected, I can just paint it in. Now once again, I'm just going to do a sloppy job, and you're going to see it because it's at such a high saturation. So I'm going to go back up here, drop this down, because I just want a little color brought back in. And we can also then play with what that color looks like. Maybe drop it more blue. So there we go. I don't want this edit to get so far out of hand. The time's probably creeping up there. But that's how I would go about bringing back life or colors into this image. That's our before, that's our after. I mean, the main takeaways, we start off like in any other color correction. We're going to start with a 3-step process. You're going to find your black point, your white point, and your mid-tone. And the easy way to do that is throwing a threshold adjustment layer on there and finding those points. Step 2 of that is the little hidden cheat with inside Photoshop. By just clicking an option click into this auto button, it gives you a bunch of hidden algorithms that Photoshop has built into it that allows us to get a more flat and more neutral color tone, which then we can apply kind of our own colors onto it. What do we do after that? Then we basically merged our layers and applied an image over the top of that. That's what we did with this layer here. Apply image is very interesting because it not only works with layers, but it also works with layer mask, and it gives us a wide variety of options to bring back details in the highlights or bring back details in the shadows. Today I used it to bring back highlights in the hair and down here in her dress or her clothing. From there, it's kind of edited to your flavor. All we did is a camera raw adjustment and added some color in here. One more step I was going to show you, as long as we were adding more color, we could, the plants and the flowers got a little yellow, so I could sample yellow. If you wanted to push them to green, I'm actually going to leave it as yellow. So I would paint similarly to what I did for her shirt. And once again, don't mind my paint job here. It's just going to be rough and dirty. I'm going to set that to soft light once again. I'm going to add a new hue saturation. I'm going to clip it, and we can pull color whichever way we want. Not that green, not a fake green. It's all about making it believable. So you can do whatever you want and push it whatever direction you want. And it would help if my computer wasn't being a little bitch tonight. Come on, it's acting slow. But you get the idea. You can push and pull these colors and edit the photo to your liking. That's pretty much it. I hope you've learned something today. Let me know in the comments below if you have. Let me know if you have any tutorials you want to learn about in the future. If not, I'm lurking around Photoshop requests and Reddit all the time. Maybe I'll edit something for you someday. If not, you can always just send me a request and I'll try to get to it. But once again, I hope you've learned something. Work smarter, not harder. I'll catch you guys next time. Have a good night.